Welcome everyone to BayCare Presents. We are going to be talking about the psychology of wellness today. We have Dr. Moser with us, who is a very valuable part of the BayCare team and oversees our EAP program. And she's going to have us take a little different look on wellness from her point of view, because it goes just beyond that diet and exercise. There's a holistic piece of this that deals with our mind, our body, and our spirit. And she does a fabulous job. So I'm not going to hold off too much. And Dr. Moser, I'm just going to turn it on over to you.
Well, thank you, Jean Marie. So welcome everyone. Thank you for having me. I would like this to be a little interactive today. So I'm going to start off by asking you to put in the chat, what comes to mind when you hear the word wellness? I'm going to give you a minute to do that. Someone says fun. Okay, so there's a whole bunch of things. Okay, so we see fun, self-care, inner peace, healthy health, taking care of our bodies and minds, whole body, holistic medicine, health, feeling good, care, holistic mind, body, spirit, physical and mental health, balance, health, mind, body, spirit. Okay, great. Emotional, emotional and physical health. Okay, wonderful. So it's nice to see that not sick. Okay, it's nice to see that you all are associating more than just physical wellness to the term wellness. So we're going to talk. We're going to start off by talking about what is wellness. Oops, let me see if I can. Okay, so wellness isn't just one dimensional. It isn't just about physical, as you all seem to know. It is multidimensional. And there are many different models of wellness that have many different domains. In a minute, I am going to share a more comprehensive model with you, just so you can see, just get an idea of what those models look like. But wellness really is the quality or state of being in good health, but especially as an actively sought goal. So for each of us, wellness is going to be something different. And somebody did say not sick, but it's more than just the absence of illness. It's our whole well-being, our overall well-being. Again, very personal to each individual. So here's an example of a model of wellness. And as you can see, this is a very comprehensive model, and it includes emotional, financial, social, spiritual, occupational, physical, intellectual, and environmental. The important thing to recognize about any model of wellness is that all of these different dimensions interact. So, for example, some of you did say mind, body, spirit, right? So, when we look at this, we see emotional, we see physical, and we see spiritual on here. So, if we're not feeling well physically, we often don't feel well emotionally, right? And if we don't feel well emotionally, we can often be sick physically, or our spiritual beliefs might not be where we want them to be, or maybe when we're under financial stress, we are also not feeling well emotionally, and then that affects our physical well-being. So as you can see, every dimension interacts with the other dimension. And for example, under social, keep in mind that social support is the biggest and best barrier to illness. So if our social support wellness isn't doing very well, then again, it's going to affect all of our other dimensions of wellness. So I'm going to have you stop and think. Looking at this model, and please feel free to share in the chat if you'd like. You don't have to, but feel free to share. Which component of wellness is most important to you? And again, keeping in mind that they all do interact, but when you look at this model, what really stands out for you? All right, somebody says emotional, somebody said spiritual. Physical, Emotional, physical. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, absolutely. So it's interesting that most people are focused on emotional, physical, and spiritual, mind, body, spirit, right? Okay. So when most people think about wellness, they do associate it with physical wellness. It's the most commonly associated dimension of wellness that people think about. So when we think about physical wellness, we think about exercise, nutrition, sleep, but also, as most of you already have mentioned, it has a significant impact on our mental well-being. Um, I think somebody wrote it differs in different, like, differs on different days. Right, exactly. Right. So some days we're going to be more focused on one component of wellness than on others. Correct. Okay. So what people don't realize is that self-care has a huge component in wellness. So improved mental health has benefits like enhanced self-esteem and self-worth and increased optimism, a positive outlook on life and love, even lower levels of anxiety and depression. So quality self-care is highly linked to improved mental health. So we want to make sure that we take care of ourselves. And poor self care causes us to feel very unhappy or discouraged. And then we seek out what I call quick fixes to feel better. So, what is a quick fix? A quick fix is when we overindulge in habits and behaviors that offer temporary relief, but they're just a distraction. So in the long run, they don't make things better for us. They actually can make things worse. For example, maybe we engage in heavier substance use, or we seek high sugar or high carbohydrate foods. And it makes us feel good again in that moment. But in the long term, it doesn't make us feel better. In fact, it can even make us feel worse. So, self care also involves valuing ourselves enough to make our health, well being, and happiness a priority. Okay. And it's the old adage again of we can't take care of others if we can't take care of ourselves, right? So, we really need to focus on self care. So, self care revolves around caring for and maximizing these four sources of energy. And the four sources of energy are the food we eat, our sleep habits and our sleep hygiene, our breath, which includes our physical movement, and our state of mind, which is our, our well-being, our emotional well-being. So what are some quick self-care tips? So one thing, in order to take care of yourself, you have to make yourself a priority and you have to make quality a priority. So it's not about how much, it's not about quantity. It's not about how much time you get by yourself or how much time you get with your support group. It's whether it's quality time, because we can be in a room full of lots of people and still not feel supported or feel like we're taking care of ourselves. So we want to make sure that it's quality and not quantity. And we want to pay attention to our thoughts. So we can go down that negative path of thinking, or we can start to engage in black and white thinking or narrow thinking. And we're going to talk a little bit more about this. We want to make sure that we're paying attention to our thoughts, because perspective has a lot to do with how we feel. Being kind to ourselves. Most everybody on here I know can say how to can tell me how they would treat their best friend, right? So if your best friend was having a hard time with something or struggling, you would know exactly what to do, right? Can you do that for yourself is the question. Sometimes we have to step out of ourselves and put ourselves in the place of being a best friend to ourselves and say, what would I say, or what would I do, or what would I suggest for my best friend if they were feeling the way I feel right now? Learning to say no when needed is a big one. Everybody feels like we have to have a reason to say no. And in reality, we don't. Okay. We can say no because we need to say no for ourselves, and we don't have to give a reason. It's okay to say, I'm just not able to do that right now. or I just cannot fit that in my schedule right now. We can be very general about it, but yet set those limits. And then finally, stay connected to ourselves and engage in those little moments of joy, whether that's to, take a bubble bath or have a cup of tea or light a candle and sit for 5 minutes, or whatever it is that we need to enjoy those moments of pleasure in our lives, that don't last long, but they give us momentary pleasure. So when you are stressed, you eat ice cream, cake, chocolate, and sweets, right? Why? Because stress spelled backwards is desserts. Well, not actually. When we are stressed, we tend to go for the high sugar, high carbohydrate sweets because they make us feel better in the moment. But again, in the long run, we feel worse. So what happens when we're under stress? Our bodies go through physiological changes, and then we have a tendency to go towards stress eating or comfort foods. So we need to be very careful because those comfort foods may feel good in the moment, but they're all good. They're also going to make us feel bad in the end. Adrenal stress, which is chronic stress and fatigue, does increase belly fat. And in a moment, we're going to talk about why. Again, social support is the biggest barrier to illness. So keep in mind, it's important that we make the time in our schedules to spend time with those people that are supportive to us. And also, when we talk about sleep, our circadian rhythm, which has to do with our sleep cycle, also impacts our cortical cycle, which again, we're going to talk about cortisol in a minute, because cortisol is a stress hormone. And chronic stress, as we all know, can cause us significant health issues. So we want to be very careful about that. Okay, so now let's talk about how stress and high cortisol impair our health. And we're just going to do a very simplified version of this. Okay, so when we're under stress, our pituitary gland is activated, which secretes adrenocorticotropic hormone. That's a lot to say there, or ACTH. And then what happens when we secrete that, it affects our adrenal gland, which then secretes adrenaline and cortisol. So it activates the adrenal gland, and then it releases adrenaline and cortisol. When we have adrenaline and cortisol in our system, we go into that fight or flight, which causes physical changes. And those physical changes can include fast breathing, increased blood pressure, tunnel vision, accelerated heart rate. It can slow down our digestion. We can sweat, and our glycogen is converted to glucose, which is sugar. And then that all leads to poor sleep and a weakened immune system, which is why we then get sick. So what are some quick stress management tips? Okay, again, these are quick tips. Learning mindfulness. Well, that term mindfulness is out there a lot. What does mindfulness really mean? It means being aware in the moment without judgment. So if you think about every moment of your life that you're awake, your brain tends to go, 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 right? Because we're constantly judging what's going on around us. So it's important with mindfulness that we kind of shut that down, that we try to just be in the moment, enjoy what's going on around us without letting our minds go, go, go. Breathing and meditation. There's all kinds of ways that we can learn to, or practice meditation. What I always tell everybody, if you're going to practice breathing, always put your hand on your abdomen or stomach. And when you breathe in, fill up that balloon in your stomach. So you feel your hand come out, and then when you exhale, let it release. If we breathe from our chest, we're going to increase our anxiety. So we want to make sure that we're breathing from our stomach. Okay, we talked a little bit before about thinking, paying attention to how we see things, avoiding stinking thinking. Okay, some of you may have heard of the David Burns Feeling Good Handbook. It's been out on the market for many, many years, and David Burns is like the guru of stinking thinking. It's where our brains go, where we make automatic assumptions, where we engage in black or white thinking, where we only pull out negative instead of seeing the big picture. So engaging in that narrow, where we have blinders on and we're not seeing all the other components. So for example, you maybe give a presentation at work, okay, and somebody says, that was a great presentation. There were a few points when I just couldn't hear you. But other than that, it went over great. We loved it. Okay. And all you hear is people couldn't hear me. So you think, I failed. I didn't do a good job because nobody could hear me. So be very careful, because the overall message was that it was great. There was just a moment here or there, we just couldn't hear you. But that didn't mean that you failed at what you did. You actually did a wonderful job. So those types of thinking, where we get ourselves in trouble. Letting go of things we cannot control. How much of your time are you spending focusing on things you can't control? So ask yourself that question. And then let go of those things and focus on things you can control, because we can make a change there. We cannot control how other people respond to us, correct? But we can control how we respond to other people. Focus on what is important to you. In Covey's book, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, he talks a lot about that quadrant of urgent, important, urgent, unimportant, not urgent, important, not urgent, unimportant. And we tend to spend a lot of our time in the not urgent, in the urgent, but not important. So we want to really focus on those things that are important to us and let go of the others and get to them when you can. Organizing your environment around you. I don't know that people really realize how the environment around you can impact you. For example, if you're a person that doesn't like clutter and your office is full of clutter, or your home is full of clutter, it makes it very hard to feel relaxed, to feel like you're taking care of yourself when you're in that kind of environment. So watch your environment, organize it around you, maybe create a little therapeutic space for yourself if you need to. Focusing on the positive. Again, not talking about toxic positivity, which is like ignoring the negative or ignoring your feelings about things, because feeling negative or having negative feelings about things, that's normal. We're going to have that, but not focusing on those negative things, but focusing more on positive change. What can I do to move forward, as opposed to getting caught up in that negativity? And then again, and I'm not going to stress it enough, that building of that support system, because that's very, very important. And in line with that support system, I want to read this quote. Anything that's human is mentionable, and anything that is mentionable can be more manageable. When we talk about our feelings, they become less overwhelming, less upsetting, and less scary. The people we trust with that important talk can help us know that we are not alone. And this is what I mean by support system. When we don't talk about something, when something is happening in our lives and bothering us and we don't talk about it, we give it power to control us. So it controls us as opposed to us controlling it. So then we become more overwhelmed, and we're not able to function the way we normally would function. But when we talk to someone about it, someone that we can trust, someone that's supportive, then we let go of that. We take the power away from whatever it is that's happened, and it then gives us the ability to work through it. Okay, so when we ask the question for wellness, why is it that some people do better with their wellness goals than others? Okay, we're going to talk about self-determination. So think about a wellness goal that you might have for yourself. Just one. Maybe you've had one in the past, and maybe you were or were not able to accomplish it. What we're going to do is take a look at your level of self-determination. You're going to need to look at that. I'm going to talk about what it is. And then we're going to talk about how that impacts our ability to reach our goals, our wellness goals. So self-determination is involves making choices and decisions based on our personal preferences and interests. So it's our own ability to manage ourselves, to make confident choices, and to think on our own, to be autonomous. It gives us the freedom to pursue our goals and the ability to be autonomous. And it refers to the process by which a person controls their own life. So a self-determined person plays an essential role in their overall well-being and overall psychological health, because if you're more self-determined, you're going to be able to accomplish the goals that you want to accomplish. If you're less self-determined, less confident, less autonomous, then you're going to have a harder time. I'm not saying you won't accomplish those goals, but it'll be more difficult. So self-determination has a large impact on motivation. So if you believe that you can manage yourself properly, then you're more likely to find more motivation in whatever it is you want to accomplish. Okay. And this encourages personal responsibility. So people who are self-determined have an internal locus of control. So what that means is that when something happens, you attribute it to something that you can work on. So for example, if you're successful at something, you attribute it to yourself, right? That you yourself created that success. When you're not successful at something, then you attribute it to something that you know you can fix, or to something that you had no control over. And so you don't see yourself as a failure. You just see it as a learning experience and something that you can actually move toward fixing. You take that personal responsibility and take credit for those successes, but also know what it is you need to change, or if you're not as successful as you would like. So people tend to be driven by three innate psychological needs. And when we fill these needs, this is what we call the intrinsic sources of motivation. And when these needs are filled, we tend to be very self-determined. So for example, they have a need to feel effective in dealing with the environment. So think about a person who doesn't have competence or feel competence. How much do they feel like they can affect their environment? If you don't feel like you have any competence, you're not going to be able to do that, right? But if you think about, for example, your job, most of you probably feel you have competence in your job. So you're able to make an impact in what you do. People also have an innate need to relate to others, to have close, affectionate relationships. And finally, people have a need to be autonomous, to feel like they can work independently and do things independently. And if you don't feel like you have any of those things, it can make it very difficult for you to impact change in yourselves and in your environment. So it involves acting with a sense of choice, a sense of volition, and commitment. So self-determination is linked with overall well-being. So those behaviors that are more self-determined and less controlled are associated with a stronger sense of personal commitment. So if you yourself feel like you can impact something, you're going to be more personally committed to it than if you felt like you had no impact. You're also going to work harder at it. You're going to persist. So if something doesn't work out the first time, you're not going to say, oh, I can't do this. You're going to say, okay, let me back up and let me find a different way, and then try something different. You're also going to have more positive feelings because you feel like you are impacting and controlling what's happening to you. You're going to perform better. You're going to feel better emotionally, and you're going to be able to engage those creative and the creative thinking and problem solving that is needed when we're trying to accomplish something. So how do you increase self-determination? Is there a way? So say you were to rate yourself today on a scale of 0 being I have absolutely no self-determination, and 10, I have the most self-determination a person could have. Think for a minute where you would rate yourself. And if you have room to grow, How can you do that? How can you increase it? Well, one is we want to go back to those innate needs and we want to try to work toward fulfilling those. How we do that, we create a supportive environment based on relating to others, based on feeling competent, and based on working autonomously. And it doesn't mean that we don't have other people work with us as a team. It just means that we know if we had to do it by ourselves, we certainly could. We also can improve our self awareness. So, what is self awareness? It's how we impact others and how others impact us. So, if we're having a reaction to something, and we're not really sure why we're having that reaction, it's important that we take a nice deep breath and that we really pay attention to what am I feeling and what is it triggering for me? Because that's going to give you the self awareness that you need in order to be successful at whatever it is you're trying to do. We talked about mindfulness, working on shutting down that judgment sometimes. Practicing the cognitive reframing. Again, when we talked earlier about the stinking thinking, you know, not automatically assuming the negative, but taking a chance to reframe something. Okay, so maybe people didn't hear me for a few moments here or there, but overall, everybody really responded positively to that presentation. So, really reframing things. Maybe I wasn't successful at this piece right now, but that's because I was, there were other factors impacting it. I know the next time I'm going to be successful at it because I'm going to work on this, this, and this, or I'm going to change this, this, and this. Increasing your social support. So when you do feel like you need that pick me up, you've got people to talk to. And then learning as much as you can about something. So if let's just say you have a wellness goal for yourself to, I'm going to simplify this, to lose 10 pounds. Okay. Because we want to make it reachable goal, right? We can start off with small goals and then we can work toward bigger goals. If your goal is to lose 10 pounds, but you know nothing about nutrition, nothing about exercise, then you're not really going to be able to accomplish that goal because you're not going to know what you need to do. So it's really important that you learn as much as you can about whatever it is that you want to accomplish. So find out about nutrition, find out about exercise, get the knowledge base that you need in order to be successful at something. So, how do we practice it? Okay, let's create a personal mission statement. What is your mission statement right now? My mission statement right now is to be healthy. Okay, that's a general one. I'm just giving you an example. Set those achievable goals that we talked about. Again, not this goal of I want to lose 100 pounds. Again, I'm simplifying, but that's a huge goal and can be very overwhelming just saying it. The goal might be I'm going to lose 10 pounds in the next 2 months. Okay. And then when you do that, then you're like, okay, now what's my next goal? So set achievable goals so that you feel your successes along the way. Practice positive self talk. Okay. So I always talk and challenge those limiting beliefs. So my little way of explaining this is you've got your pathological critic. Your pathological critic can be someone from your past. Some people have told me a parent, maybe someone else in your past that's been highly critical of you. Maybe it's yourself. Okay. So this is your pathological critic. And then you've got your healthy coach. Your healthy coach could be somebody in your life that's always been your cheerleader, always been your support. And again, could be yourself. What you want to work on is practicing or growing that healthy coach and minimizing that pathological critic. Okay, you want to work on that, challenging those limiting beliefs that that critic is saying to you. And again, we're going to come back to that control, focusing on what you can control and letting go of the things that you cannot control. So I'm gonna end with this. So we did this in time. When individuals can cultivate self-determination, they develop the spirit and resilience to overcome obstacles. They become more confident in themselves and their abilities, which ultimately guides their journey toward wellness. I want you to keep in mind that this is a journey. It takes time, it takes patience. There will be forward steps and there will be backward steps, but your forward steps are going to be more than your backward steps. And the journey is unique for everyone. So what one person might go through to reach their wellness goal is not going to be what you go through. So comparing yourself to others is not going to be helpful. And I tell this to everybody all the time. Let go of the judgment and just focus on your goals. Your journey, each journey is valid. It is unique and it is meaningful to you, and it's worth fighting for. So it won't be easy, and I'm not going to tell you it's easy because none of this is easy, right? But it'll be worth the effort. And self-determination provides the tools to persevere through those setbacks. So I'm not going to tell you that just because you're self-determined doesn't mean you're never going to have setbacks, because we all do. It just means that you're not going to let that stop you from reaching your goal. You're going to persevere. You may have to take a step backwards. You may have to come up with a different plan, your plan B, your plan C, and then you're going to forge forward. All right. Anybody have any questions on that?
That was incredible. And you can all see why we asked Dr. Moser to come do this talk. Coming from my exercise physiologist, health coach perspective, I love how she shared that deep emotional part of it, because that's where a lot of it happens. When people aren't reaching their needs, they're not finding all the little nooks and crannies that they want to deal with. And I love how she kind of pointed a lot of those out. I hope you got all of those nice rocks that she talked about. You know, we need to look at things, but it ultimately comes back to us, and we need to make sure that we're going on good information. So when you are looking for resources, make sure you're vetting them and that they're good. In fact, some people ask, what was the name of the author on the stinking thinking that you mentioned?
So that was David Burns. It's been around for a long time. I recommend the Feeling Good Handbook, not the other book. The Feeling Good Handbook has some like really concrete things that you can do to really look at your sinking thinking and to really change it. So, it talks about the black and white thinking, like it's the all or nothing thinking. So if you don't succeed at one of your steps, then you see yourself as a failure, as opposed to, it just being something that got in the way. So he actually has like exercises for how you can pay attention to your thinking and change it. So that's the one I recommend.
Awesome. And Cindy put a good tip on there. If none of you have heard of Libby, it's an app that you can get on your phone or your iPad. It's a library. If you have a library card in whatever county you're in, you can get access to a lot of books for free. You read them digitally. And then I know I did one for that breathing book that I recommended on here, and I loved it so much I went and bought the book. But it's a way for you to kind of check some books out too before you have to own them all. So Dr. Moser, one of the questions we have here is, what is your thoughts on, how do we get this journey started? We could start today, correct?
Yes. Okay. So normally when I do this presentation, it's an hour. So I have people do this, like stop and think a lot. So I didn't do that today, but I asked you to do that on your own. When I asked you to stop and think the first time today, I asked you, and some of you put it in the chat, like what is the focus for you when you look at that multidimensional model of wellness? And a lot of you said mind, body, spirit, those types of things. So you start with, what is the dimension of wellness that really resonates with you? Because remember, one dimension is going to affect all the others anyway. So once you pick that, then my next step, or my next request for you, would be to sit back and think of one important goal that you would like to accomplish in that area. So for example, and I'm trying to come up with something different here. Let's just say that, all right, I'll give it a mental health awareness goal. So let's just say a person decides that they just haven't been feeling their usual self. So right now, the emotional wellness is most important to them. So then I would say, well, where would you like to see yourself in 6 months? well, I'd like to feel better about myself. I'd like to feel less anxious, those. So, okay, so better about myself and less anxious. So, how do I then take that into a concrete goal? Um, I would like to work on my anxiety. Okay, again, this is an example. All right, so how do you work on anxiety? So, you've come up with your goal. I want to lessen my anxiety. And then the next step is, how do I do that? So there's all kinds of ways that we can work on anxiety, correct? We can see a therapist, we can do some self-help, we can practice meditation. And usually at the end of this talk, I do a guided imagery or relaxation, and that helps us practice it. But there's all kinds of free opportunities to do that online. Maybe your place of business has an online resource center where you can practice that. Um, so then you then work toward that goal. Set a goal, like in one, I'm going to rate my anxiety today. Let's just say my anxiety today is an 8. And then in 1 month, I'm going to rate my anxiety again after I've started acclimating these coping skills into my daily routine. I'm going to spend 5 minutes every day doing meditation, or I'm going to spend 5 minutes every day doing mindfulness. It's not like you have to spend a lot of time, but you can start setting those small goals. Next month's talk, I think, is on metabolism. So, for example, if your goal is to lose 10 pounds or 5 pounds, then I'm going to attend that webinar next month because I'm going to learn how to increase my metabolism. That's a goal. Does that answer that question?
I think that did a great job of kind of taking that thought and just to kind of piggyback on that. A great way to do those 5 minutes of meditation, if we're looking at that mental health thing, is tie it into a habit you already have. So every time I'm getting ready for bed at night, I'm going to take 5 minutes as I'm going to bed and do something mindfulness, put on an app, or do some meditation. That way, it makes it part of a habit you already have, and these small steps really help to promote you to move forward. Too many times we take too big of a jump, and I think Dr. Moser did a great job of explaining, taking those nice small steps. Think about that one thing that you can make a change on. I love how you said work on it for 4 weeks, and then at 4 weeks you're like, oh, look at this change I've made. And then what's the next step that I want to make? Because a lot of times it's taking those small continual steps that are going to get you down the line, as opposed to trying to take these ginormous leaps as you're building those muscles that you're working on. I think that was a great example.
Absolutely, Jean Marie. And those little steps, when you do accomplish them, you'll be amazed at how much motivation they give you to accomplish the next step.
In the chat to see
Baby
if there were
steps.
any. Yes, baby steps.
Yep. Any other
And think
questions? Go ahead,
there's
Jean Marie.
nothing else now, but I think one other little point is you don't have to change everything. We looked at a lot of things today. In reality, if you take a conscious effort to pick one thing that you feel confident that you can start to work on, and just start that today, because someone said, what can I concretely do today? Pick one thing, and pick one thing within that one thing that you feel confident that I can make that effort. I'm going to walk for 5 extra minutes. I'm going to look into some better nutrition for myself. I'm going to look up one of those apps. I'm going to try and get Libby and get one of those books and read that. Pick something that you can successfully do, and that's going to help you make that next successful step so that you can get that inner cheerleader talking a little bit more and quieting down that critic, as Dr. Moser brought up. Last call for questions. It was such a great talk. There didn't have to be too many. You laid that out so beautifully.
Well, thank you, Jean Marie.
All right.
All right. Well, I hope everyone does reach their goal. I hope you set a small goal for yourself today, because we can start today and work toward it. So thank you, Jean Marie.
Thank you. And thank you all for taking time out of your day to join us. And we look forward to seeing you next month. Again, please share. And if for some reason you don't get a link, please reach out to me. You all have my email, and I'll help make sure that you get it. Have a wonderful week.
Bye, everyone.